this is mainly because Pastor's not here, and he's got a special message for you, and I'm going to deliver it, right? Put my own spin on it. So, you see the picture up ahead. It's a burrowing owl. This is a native owl to the southwestern America, specifically the San Francisco Bay, California area, Dublin, that city. Now, in 2013, this owl was threatened by a big commercial development, and the city of Dublin was the one trying to do it, and they were taken to court by some environmental rights activists. And they battled in the courts for like 8 years. And finally, in like 2021 sometime, they started breaking ground. And to them, that was progress. The city of Dublin started developing and moving forward with the plan that they set forth 8 years ago before they were attacked. When you try to progress somewhere, someone's typically going to see that and view it as an attack, and they're going to respond in kind. I know you guys might not care about that owl. I know I don't. But what about this? This is a protest in response to the 2019, what was it? In 2019, you had the Supreme Court, I don't know if you guys remember, passed a ruling on Roe v. Wade, giving rights back to the states to make decisions for abortion. Now, in Utah in particular, they were coming up with a bill to restrict abortion further back to the date of conception. Now, like whatever it was, I don't remember how many weeks it was, but they were pushing it further to the point of conception, which is, in our view, progress, right? We would consider that progress. And these protesters came out to essentially threaten and attack that and show opposition for that. Now, in response, you had people like these that were marching, trying to show the legislators, the people in charge, that they supported what they were doing. Say, hey, like this bill that you guys are getting ready to pass to restrict abortion further, like that's a good thing. We support that. And the main point is progress is always attacked, especially when it comes to the things of God. Now, this is very important in the kingdom of God because we, like in this church, have people appointed over us that are spearheading things. And we need to support them however we can to make sure that progress succeeds and that we aren't pushed back in this war, right? Because it is a war. It's a war for, like, the stakes are very, very high. Let's talk about the stakes. People are hurting, right? You got people are hurting with their crisis on the inside, their pains on the outside, you can see, and then you've got eternity and life and death. Now, the thing is, God always provides a path to victory, but we have to take it if we want to win. So, here's an ancient example. In Exodus 17, starting at verse 8, going through 13, it says, while the people of Israel were still at Rephidim, the warriors of Amalek attacked them. Moses commanded Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight the army of Amalek for us. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill, holding the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did what Moses had commanded and fought the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur climbed to the top of a nearby hill. As long as Moses held up the staff in his hand, the Israelites had the advantage. But whenever he dropped his hand, the Amalekites gained the advantage. Moses' arms soon became so tired he could no longer hold them up. So Aaron and Hur found a stone for him to sit on. They then stood on each side of Moses, holding up his hands, so his hands held steady until sunset. As a result, Joshua overwhelmed the army of Amalek in battle. This is an artist's rendition of what that would have looked like. I think this is from the Mormons, but it's a great painting. I like it in particular as I was searching for it because it shows like how utterly exhausted he would have been holding his arms up for hours. I don't know if anyone's ever tried it. Holding your arms up for even minutes is utterly exhausting, especially when you're holding something in it. So it's a really good image of what's going on there. And Moses, He had people underneath him supporting him, people fighting on the battlefield, and everyone had a part in that victory. When holding up that staff, Moses had to hold it up. That staff might as well be a representation of the power of God, but also the burden of leadership. The burden of leadership is sometimes too heavy to do all by yourself. You need people supporting you, Aaron and Hur. They saw the need, and the stakes were too high to do nothing. The battle was raging on down below, and they supported when the burden was too much for their leader to maintain. Victory happens together in this battle, this spiritual war. We need each other, whether it's through earnest prayers or to keep each other going in the right direction. In 1 Samuel 12:23, it says, "As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you, and I will teach you the way that is good and right." It's basically talking about Samuel when he's having issues with his brethren, and he's trying to tell them, hey, like, you guys are being bad, but like, I'm going to pray for you anyway, because it's my job. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to pray for each other. You have to keep each other going in the right direction. With helping hands, that's also very important. You've got to help out when able. Galatians 1 Galatians 6:2 says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." You need to encourage each other. We need to keep each other covered, because doing the Lord's work can be dangerous. All right? When advancing against an enemy, my teammates provide cover for me. We call it cover, we call it overwatch, security, whatever. Basically, when I'm focusing in on something, my teammates look. They're at my left and right, looking with me, trying to support me whenever needed in case an attack comes that I might not be able to handle. And it's the same thing when doing work for God. A good example, in the beginning of Acts chapter 14, Paul and Barnabas are preaching at Iconium. They're making a ton of progress for God. They're spreading the good news, and it's working. However, a plot to kill them emerges from the opposition. That was probably devised by Satan. They want to kill them before they can do any more. And someone that was probably good and looking out notified Paul and Barnabas, and they got out of there. They fled, and they were able to do that because people were covering for them. They were looking out for each other. God uses men to lead others. He gives men a vision and a purpose. Moses. When God confronted Moses, he told him, "Free my people. Bring them to the promised land." We have to trust that God gives them direction and wisdom. They are in a position of servitude and glory, but not for themselves, but for God. These people, these leaders, are positioned to be seen. They're out front in their discipline. You can recognize it in their study, in their evangelism to others. They're going to be pursuing God, praying constantly, and that takes sacrifice. Because Lord knows it's difficult to pray for hours and hours when you'd much rather be doing anything else, and you've got things to do. They're getting close to God. They're getting answers. They're seeking answers. In Proverbs 20, verse 18, it says, "Plans are established by seeking advice." So if you wage war, you need to obtain guidance. And we are waging war, spiritual war, right? So in giving, this leaders will be noticed by how they give themselves. Paul states that he's willing to spend and be spent. Paul is a great example of servant leadership. He's not in it for the glory. It's not about peacocking, right? Jesus called them, and so Paul, along that same line in Corinthians, he said, actually, no, that's not Corinthians. Yep, that's in Matthew. So Jesus called his disciples in Matthew together. He said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." Right there. Yep, Matthew 20, 25, 28. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So a lot of people associate leadership with glory and power, but it's not about that. The Bible is clearly talking about leaders as servants. They are servants there to serve the people. And it does come with authority. Make no mistake of it. And we're going to talk about that. The placement of leadership is about overseeing the flock. They got to know the state of the flock. They're constantly watching, right? Guarding as if they are shepherds. And they will be held accountable in the end. In Luke chapter 12, 35 through 40, this is a bit of a long one, but bear with me. It's important. Be dressed in readiness. Keep your lamps alight, and be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door to him when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master shall find on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will gird himself to serve, and he will have them recline at the table, and will come up and wait on them. Whether he comes in the second watch or even the third, and finds them, so blessed are those slaves. And be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would have not allowed his house to be broken into. You too, be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. What's important, more important, is this next part. When Peter says, Lord, are you addressing this parable to us or to everyone else? Because that's just a general commandment for guys to be ready for God. But for the disciples, he says, who then is this faithful and sensible steward whom his master will put in charge of his servants to give them their rations at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds doing so when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that slave will come on a day he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him into pieces and assign him in a place with the unbelievers. And that slave who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accord with his will shall receive many lashes. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive but few. And from everyone who has been given much, much shall be required. And to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. This is talking about leaders toward the end. This is talking about those disciples who are going to be in charge of people. They are going to be held accountable, right? They have authority over those underneath them, but at the same time, that comes with an accountability. More responsibility from God with more authority. These leaders have the staff of God in their hand, and they must wield it. Moses had a stick. It was a regular walking stick. However, through God, it became the instrument to victory in multiple occasions, crossing the Red Sea, the battle with Joshua over the Amalekites. Total victory. And it was clearly not Moses, right? Because he was holding the staff above his head. Like he didn't exercise any battle plans or any tactical advantage with that. That was clearly the power of God. And that's the way it's meant to be. Not our own powers, not our own talents, not our own personality, right? God is more effective than you on your best day. God does this on purpose. A man's weakness is God's tool, right? In Corinthians, Paul describes his thorn. He's asking God to remove it, saying, please remove this thorn from me, God. And the Lord says in response to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And then Paul says, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults and hardships, and persecution and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong, right? That's glory to God. That's not glory to yourself. You recognize leadership by their nonstop contending, their held up arms. Moses, arms reaching up to heaven, perfect example for that. That is a good leader. That's what you have to do if you're in charge. And here's the reality. If he's doing this by himself and he becomes weary, he drops his hands, the attackers are going to prevail, right? The Amalekites would have won. So Then it comes to the support that leadership has, the Aaron and the Hur. Behind every great victory is an Aaron and a Hur, because it's impossible for one man to do it all on his own. You need to have support from God and from your brethren. You need to have men to uphold the leader. This is a picture of a whole lot of chiefs and no Indians. You're not going to see success without anyone to support. There's, just like in the military, we found success doing it that way. There's a hierarchy. God knows. It's in the Bible. So, supporting leadership. All these people realized that Moses was positioned by God. Joshua, Aaron, Hur, the army. And they trusted God to direct him, because he told them, hey, go out and attack this army tomorrow. I'm going to stand on top of this hill and uphold the staff from God. And they were like, okay. They went and did it, which is a big ask, right? From a guy who's not a war fighter or a tactician. So they trusted him. They trusted God to direct and bring everybody else along. So alongside leadership, the Aaron and the Hurs, they help him do what must be accomplished, right? Investing their own strength, their own prayers, their own evangelizing, their own examples, and their own giving. But it's not about when you're supporting, it's not about reaching for the glory, right? Like we talked about, the Bible's clear about servant leadership. It's not, the glory isn't yours, it belongs to God. He might give you authority and power, but the glory isn't yours. So being invisible is kind of an important thing to think about, an important trait to have, if you will, because it'll keep you humble. You're not shooting for the limelight. In sports, passes always precede the goal, and you share in that, right? You got to be faithful behind the scenes, because it's not about you. It's about the mission, the Great Commission. Jesus called them together and said, you know that I already said that. Yep. So it's not about you, it's about the mission. And when you're supporting leadership, you have to hold steady. Aaron and Hur used their own arms to steady his. They did it all the way to the finish line until the sun went down, until the mission was accomplished and the army was defeated. They motivated the rest of the army, Joshua's army. Those men looking up, they saw the rod of God. They saw the inspiration to continue fighting. And like I said, Aaron and Hur saw the need. They saw the weakening of Moses. After it only says that he dropped his arms and he tried to put him back up and he couldn't do it. And they immediately got in to solve the problem. They saw that need, and Moses, it isn't said in the Bible, Moses asked for help. He didn't go, help me. I can't do this. They stepped in. And you got to be aware of that, because leaders can't do everything. In Acts, a good example of this, Acts 6, 1 through 7, it says, let's see, do I have this right now? Yep. But as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. Widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. They chose men who were well respected and are full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will give them this responsibility. Then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the word. So God's message continued to spread. That progress right there was because they had people supporting them that could step up when the time was right. Bam. Let's talk about the victory. This right here is a picture of a celebration that took place after a soccer game, football or whatever. Like, this is the World Cup, I guess. All the people in here, I'm sure you could all guess, not one of them really looks like a soccer player. Maybe some of them look like fans, but none of them look like they're on the team. But they're sharing in that celebration, in that triumph. They supported with, I guess in their mind, just cheers, right? So how much can we do being as close as we are to our leadership, the people on the front lines. We share in that triumph. Israel's progression toward the promised land was shared by Aaron and Hur that day, supporting Moses. The world realized that there was a God on that day, a capital G God, because he had power through upholding that staff. His power flew through them, and they knew that day. The whole world knew. They created a movement in the earth, and nations wanted to hitch their wagon to Israel on that day. We can create a movement in the region. We can see souls saved. We can see people changed. People will have the ability to know God for themselves. That said, I'm going to close right now. I'll leave it with a final message. When you support leadership the best you can with your helping hand, with your prayers, with your encouragement, with whatever gifts have been bestowed upon you, with your cover, right? It puts wind in their sails. With your faith, it inspires them to keep going. That being said, I'm going to open these altars. Let's bow our heads and pray. If you're sitting here tonight and you don't know God, or you feel like you've backslidden, now is the time to just make an acknowledgement. Make a commitment. Because God He's good on so many levels. And he can bring you through anything. And he makes life worth living. And if you don't know God today, or if you feel like you've drifted away from him, I'm urging that you come to this altar tonight and just make a commitment to restore your relationship through Christ. Because the blood of God, the blood of Christ is all that you need. All you need is to just ask for forgiveness. And if that's you, as Kathy begins playing music, I ask that you come down to the altar and pray. These altars are open. For God's people, if you feel like God's touched you tonight, through his words, through his message about leadership and what you need to do and the way you see it, I ask that you come down and just reflect on it and just keep it in your back pocket for when it's time for you to become a leader. These altars are open.